Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Walter Dial, CPA and tax partner at GRF CPAs and Advisors here in Bethesda, Maryland. Our mission here on the podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building sellable business value and for planning your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that's sellable and exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. Walter, when helping a business owner client, we consider alignment a key idea or concept, and that so many things need to be aligned for success in building value or exiting. Strategy needs to be aligned with mission, vision, and values, or organizational clarity, as we refer to it often. Operations then needs to be aligned with the strategy. Employee goals, ideally, are going to be aligned with the owner goals for both growth and exit.
That's right, Pat. And I think this is going to be a great presentation because probably a lot of our listeners are really not as familiar with alignment as they should be. I think it's going to be very, very helpful. And our guest today is Dave Ramos, the CEO of ShiftPoints. Dave is an author, speaker, and CEO of ShiftPoints, Inc. ShiftPoints helps mid-market companies unleash the accelerating power of alignment. Prior to founding ShiftPoints, Dave was the vice president of global marketing for Nortel Networks. At Nortel, Dave won the company's highest award, the Chairman's Award, for innovations in marketing. At IBM, Dave won the company's highest award, the Golden Circle, for excellence in sales. He has an MBA from the Harvard Business School and a BS in accounting from Drexel University. And Dave is the author of 3 books, ShiftPoints, Decide One Thing, and Drive One Direction, How to Unleash the Accelerating Power of Alignment. Gee, Pat, we couldn't have found somebody more qualified to talk today. Dave, obviously you are laser beam focused on the issue of alignment. So exactly what does alignment mean, and why do you think it's so critical and important?
Well, first of all, thanks, guys, for having me on the podcast. And I am passionate about this issue. In my career, I had 5 back-to-back experiences where misalignment was the root cause of just massive organizational dysfunction. The first was a failed merger. And then it was a failed startup that I was a part of where the CEO, the chief technology officer, and the board could simply not agree on what business we were in, what products we were building, how we were building the product, or what customer to target. And that misalignment caused the failure of the startup. I then did a project for a government entity, and I can assure you they were massively misaligned. I then did a project for a mid-market company that had lost focus, and they were not aligned with the external realities of the business they were in. And then I went to work at a nonprofit, and that was probably the worst of all of them. And so I decided to start a company to help organizations improve this issue of alignment. And we define it in 3 dimensions. Alignment's an optimal state where everyone and everything is externally aligned with the market realities. They're vertically aligned with the corporate priorities and horizontally aligned with each other so that the organization works as one company, as one team, et cetera, leveraging the full power of the resources of the company to come together and serve customers.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for coming on this, Pat. Really appreciate it. Why would you say alignment? We're working with companies as of this week, $35 million and under in revenue. And so why would you say alignment, from your perspective, would be mission critical for businesses of that size, $35 million and under in revenue?
Well, yes, we work in a similar space, sometimes a little bigger, but generally the same kind of mid-market. And let me say that even solopreneurs can have alignment problems where they're not aligned with themselves about what they're doing. But generally, as the company grows, they create divisions. And the big problem is that divisions, by definition, divide. So they might open a second office or start a second product line and create a second P&L or a third P&L or a third office. And, as you grow, these things, although well-meaning, can create a massive misalignment where the divisions become like warring tribes or silos, or what Satya Nadella described as at Microsoft as having become a federation of fiefdoms. And so, this is what happens when companies grow. And, they didn't mean to get misaligned. They just weren't paying attention. And then pretty soon it becomes a big problem.
Yeah, so I want to follow that up with why or how do you think companies get out of alignment? Let me just, though, before I do that, share an observation with you with the work that we're doing, helping owners build sellable value and exit. Is, we talk a lot about organizational clarity, mission, vision, and values, and oftentimes these things aren't even clear to begin with. And the purpose or the one direction. I'm really enjoying this, your latest book, Drive One Direction, Decide One Thing. Oftentimes that one thing hasn't been established as to what we can be best at, what we really do, our purpose, and then our vision for that purpose and the values that kind of serve as the foundation for all and guide us in all of our decisions. And so we see that everything else, strategy and operations, systems, processes, people, everything gets out of alignment if those core things or organizational clarity is out of alignment. If you could just comment on that, and then just anything else that you would say as to why you think companies get out of alignment.
Well, you're exactly right. The issue of organizational clarity is critical. And so it starts with putting those foundational elements in place, a clear and compelling vision, a clear mission, a sense of purpose, a sense of values, a clear identification of what the core competence of the business and what the competitive advantage of the business is. And I think what happens is when companies just get started, they're just focused on winning their first customer and making payroll, right? So they often don't put these foundational elements in place. And then if they're good at what they do, they win another customer, and then another customer, and then another customer, and then off they go. And as they grow, they're so focused on just growing the business that they don't stop to put these foundational components in place that create the organizational clarity that you mentioned. We have a joke, when the whole company can go to lunch in one car, you probably don't need all this stuff, right? Because you can decide over lunch that we're going to do something and you just do it and you're fine. But as the companies grow, then now you have 20 people or 30 people or 40 people. You have an organization structure. You have people that are, 3 levels removed from the chief executive. And they never put these foundational elements in place. And then the company starts grinding to a halt. And we see this all the time where the company gets plateaued, where this is why we call the company shift points, because the company is at a shift point where what got them to 5 million won't get them to 10, or what got them to 10 won't get them to 100. And so they have to put these things in place.
Yeah, that's right, because alignment, how would you describe alignment impacting scalability?
It's critical. It's absolutely critical. And a misalignment, conversely, can impede your ability to grow. Because what happens is that the company becomes siloed. The divisions become competitive with one another. We're working with one company now that has 3 P&Ls for their 3 different lines of business. They have 3 different business models. Each of those P&Ls or the business models for each of those businesses are quite different. And there's lots of consternation amongst the management team about the revenue allocation across those 3 P&Ls, about cost allocation, disputes over which business is really the most profitable one, where we should invest, all these kinds of things. And so this just grinds the business to a halt. And so, in our model, alignment starts at the top. The CEO has to operate as the chief alignment officer. One of the people we interviewed was a gentleman by the name of Randy Papadelis. Randy's the now retired CEO of Ocean Spray Cranberry Cooperative. A very interesting business because it's a cooperative. So he just said, I had 700 bosses. Each of the co-op members felt like his boss. And so he had to create alignment. And so it starts at the top, and then the executive team really has to work as one team, because a misaligned executive team will never create an aligned company. So that executive team has to come together about the vision, about the values, about the mission and purpose, about the strategy, about the strategic imperatives. And they have to create alignment at the top, and then it can cascade through the organization. But if it's misaligned at the top, it'll be massively fouled up at the bottom, and then the organization grinds to a halt.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Dave. And I would assume there's certain businesses that alignment is just kind of a natural issue for them. Like, just look at a CPA firm. Traditional CPA firm has an audit practice, a tax practice, a consulting practice, maybe an outsourced accounting practice. So, and like you said, they all kind of are keeping track of their own profitability and operations.
Yes, and so that's true. That's a great example of where the corporate structure that is put in place with the partnership, the way the partnership is set up, creates like a structural impediment to alignment. Is one of the things we look at is the structure of the organization. And there are firms that decide we're going to build alignment into the business from day one. One of the examples we write about in the book is the Carlyle Group. And they decided from day one that they were going to be one Carlyle. So they actually used that terminology, one Carlyle, from the beginning, because they did not want the different practice areas or the different investment sides of the business, or like a CPA firm, the different practice areas that you mentioned. They didn't want them to become so siloed that they became internally competitive, and then they can't really ultimately serve the customer. Because, my hunch is that accounting firm that you mentioned would like to sell audit and tax and other advisory and all services to their customers, but their structure impedes that. And the comp plan, to follow up, is the comp plan often impedes it too, right? So one of the things we'll look at is how is compensation set? When Alan Mulally became the CEO of Ford, he implemented the now legendary One Ford campaign. And one of the very first things he addressed was executive compensation. And he changed it so that a significant percentage of everybody's comp was then tied to corporate performance, not just their own division or geography.
Yeah, makes sense. So how can a company assess their current level of alignment?
Well, this is a tricky issue. How aligned are we? And are we more aligned now than we were last quarter or last month? And, every CEO that I interviewed as part of our research, I would ask them about that old adage. Well, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And everybody would say, oh, I totally agree with that. And then I would say, okay, well, how do you measure alignment? And there'd be this kind of awkward silence, because the vast majority of them had no way of measuring alignment. And if you don't measure it, obviously you can't manage it. So we developed a tool called the Acceleration Index that looks at across 21 dimensions of alignment. And we start with the executive team. And this gives us a quantitative measure of alignment. And it allows us to very easily identify where the executive team might be misaligned. So one of the questions is about the performance of the sales channel. And is the sales channel aligned with the business? And so you imagine then, some of the executives say strongly agree and others say strongly disagree. Well, okay, now we know that we have an issue because the executives aren't in alignment or in agreement with the performance of the channel. And so this helps us. And one of the things we see is that alignment leaks. When you do the peel the onion on the results of this acceleration index tool, what we see is the score of the CEO will be 7 points higher on average than the score of the executive team. And that'll be about 7 points higher than the next level of management. And it just goes down and down, 7 points about per each layer. And so, alignment leaks. So the CEO might give the company a very good score, but the frontline staff, might be 20 points lower than that.
Yeah. So some of the things that we see and symptoms, if you will, of misalignment, the plateaued growth that you mentioned a few minutes ago, oftentimes because the owner and hence the company are trying to do too many things. They don't know what to say yes to, and they don't know what to say no to. They're not well differentiated from the competition because they are trying to do too many things. There can be too internal confusion and lack of clear communication, lack of accountability, lack of clear expectations. A lot of symptoms like that. What are some of the other symptoms that you recognize just in a conversation? Let's say you're having coffee with a CEO this afternoon, and first time you've met him, and you're drawing him out or her out on her business. What are some of the things that might throw up caution or red flags in the context of the conversation, Dave?
Yeah, well, first, let me comment on the two you raised because we see those every day. Okay, so the lack of differentiation is a huge issue, and that was really the subject of my first book, which was called Decide One Thing. You have to find something that can be your ultimate differentiating competitive advantage. And if that's not clear, well, everything else will suffer. The second is the lack of discipline in the pursuit of new opportunities. And this is often well-intentioned, of course. The customers will say to the business, hey, well, could you help us with this problem? And being entrepreneurs, they'll say, sure. And then another customer say, can you help us with that problem? And they'll say, sure. And then somebody will come up with an idea for a different service and they'll say, sure. And pretty soon they take their limited resources and they have 5 new strategic businesses that they're trying to start. They take their eye off the ball in the core business. And now the core business has now suffered and plateaued, and none of the new initiatives have been successful enough to generate positive cash flow. We see this every day, this same phenomenon. Mark Cuban has a line about entrepreneurship, and he calls it drowning in opportunities. But the best companies have the discipline to say yes to the very best opportunities and no or not now to the ones that are secondary. So those two we see right away. The other thing I would listen for is the way that CEO describes their management team, their executive team in particular. So often before the CEO is finished with their salad, they're complaining about, somebody on their management team. And, that's a red flag, clearly, that the team is not aligned. And, maybe there are issues with that person's performance, but, that's an immediate red flag that we see right away. Plateaued growth, low employee engagement. These are all red flags that are likely to be, if we chase them back down all the way to their root cause, we would say that misalignment is the root cause of virtually every organizational dysfunction that we see.
And Dave, tell us about your Drive One Direction methodology.
Well, as I mentioned, I started the company to focus on alignment. And so, here I am 10 years later, still working on that. And so the methodology continues to evolve. It started out with the sense of we need to get the business aligned around what is your one thing, what is your core competitive advantage. That led us then to focus on strategy. Let's make sure that the strategy is intensely focused and that we're aligned around the best opportunities and we are pruning the ones that are underperforming. And then that grew into focusing on the executive team. And now there's 21 components of the alignment methodology and the Drive One Direction process. And that's what we look at because alignment is a big, complicated, multidimensional problem. And the more we worked on it, the more it, expanded into these other areas. Like, for example, I went to see a CEO not that long ago, and he said to me, "We have a sales problem." And then he went on to describe a little bit about that. And I said, "Well, here's what I can tell you. You may, in fact, have a sales problem. But this I can guarantee you, you don't just have a sales problem. It's more complicated than that. There are other areas of organizational misalignment that's the root cause of that sales problem. And, the sales problem is a symptom of other things. And so that's what it's about, and we use the word one all the time, one team, one vision, one strategy, one goal. And we try to help these companies create what we call one company cultures, where they really, really work as one company to serve and, win and serve and retain and grow customers.
Fantastic. And you also have something called the Pit Stop program. How does that work?
Yes. Well, it's a one-day workshop where, everybody's busy, right? All these companies, they're busy doing doing their, a million miles an hour. And so we developed this as a one-day workshop where we start with the acceleration index I mentioned, and then we get them in hopefully off-site for a day where we go through the results of the acceleration index and all the other things that we do and identify the top critical issues that need to be resolved. And then we run the transformation in what we call 90-day sprints. So, and we call that the Top Gear program. That's the follow-up. But we start with the pit stop. That gives companies a very easy way to, invest a day, identify their areas of misalignment, put action plans in place to address those, and then get back in the race.
Dave, when a company, one more big question here, and then I want you to promote your book, your latest book. One big question, when a company has an exit, most likely a merger or an acquisition, once that deal is done, alignment has to become job one. I mean, we've been talking about it's hard enough to make sure you're aligned with the one business you have, the one business you've started, grown, so on and so forth. But boy, when you take on an acquisition or merge with another and they have to integrate, two companies have to come together, cultures have to come together, strategy, operation, all of that. Oh my goodness. This is easy to say or to promise, but massively difficult to do. What would you say? What would you say about that?
Well, first of all, at a very personal level, to the extent that this, the company we're talking about or the listeners of your podcast, they're privately held. The person's entire net worth is tied to the transaction, and their upside is tied to some integration value that gets created through the deal, right? So alignment might be, we think it's mission critical. We think it's the ultimate competitive advantage, but for a lot of companies, it's not urgent. But once you have a deal, you have a merger, and think about it. Yesterday, you were two companies. You had two vision statements, two lists of core values, two sales forces, two product lines, two ways of doing things. And now you issue a press release telling the world you're one company. But all you did was issue a press release. You didn't do any of the hard work now. And you have to go through the process systematically about aligning everything. It starts at the executive team. Obviously, they need to be one team. They need to have one vision. They need to take the two mission statements and rationalize them and either pick one or the other or write a new hybrid. And they have to, do the same with the core values. They have to do the same with the strategy, with the product line, with all of these things. And so that's what, that is really easy to say we're going to do and really, really difficult to do. This is why 70, 80% of the mergers fail to achieve the synergy value that was promised by the investment bankers. So, I didn't write my book per se to be a merger integration playbook, but I think it would take companies through step by step a process of looking at alignment in a systematic way.
Okay, great. So, Dave, you've packaged pretty much everything that most everything that we've talked about today and your findings in a new book, which I'm very much enjoying. Thanks for sending along a copy. I'd already bought it, but I appreciate it. So tell us about the new book, Drive One Direction.
Well, my book's called Drive One Direction, How to Unleash the Accelerating Power of Alignment. I started working on it really 14 years ago. Some of the sentences are 14 years old, but I really spent about 18 months studying companies. I studied over 300 companies. I interviewed over 100 CEOs, and I packaged my findings into the book, and it includes 50 case studies of exemplar companies. Every one of the case studies is 1 page long, so it's a really quick read, and it's a very eclectic mix. Ford, Microsoft, Tesla, Amazon, Netflix, USAA, and even Cirque du Soleil. We also have small companies featured that have applied the Drive One Direction methodology, for-profits, nonprofits. It's a fun read and eclectic mix, and I'm excited about the feedback it's getting.
I think this has been really, really enlightening in a lot of ways. And I just think of, it's funny, some of the steps we've taken in our firm here in the last 4 years, we didn't define it as alignment, but that's definitely what we've been doing. Like you mentioned, Dave, the compensation package. We've changed all that to encourage partners and employees to be doing things that benefit the whole corporation, as opposed to, just basing it on how many tax clients you can pick up or how many audit clients you can pick up, that type of thing. And like I said, we didn't, and I think a lot of our listeners, they may not associate the term alignment with their problem, or their success, but I think it's been very helpful to hear you describe it, and it certainly is a critical factor for the work Pat and I do. So thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. My original hypothesis was that alignment was really important, and my bottom line conclusion is that alignment's the ultimate competitive advantage, and that highly aligned companies just radically outperform their fragmented competitors. And so that's why we say alignment's job one.
Yeah, completely agree with you. That's what we're trying to do here, is help owners build businesses that do have value, that can be sold or transferred at some point. I couldn't agree with you more that alignment is absolutely essential for that to happen. Dave, hey, if listeners want to contact you, how can they do that?
Yeah, Dave at shiftpoints.com, shift points like shifting a car. And I'd love to help in any way I can. And I totally agree on the exit valuation. I'm happy to say that many of the clients that we have worked with have gone through this alignment process, have had very successful exits. And I believe that the valuation that those companies received was, significantly higher because the buyer saw a highly aligned company where all these things were in place.
Terrific. Okay, well, Dave, thanks again for coming on, and all the best to you and success to you in your new book. And we'll have you back again if you're willing to come back at some point in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, Love to chat again. Thanks for having me.
Okay, great. And folks, if you want help in maximizing the value of your business or planning comprehensively for your eventual exit, you can reach Walter at 301-951-9090. You can reach me at 301-859-0860. You can also access resources at exitreadiness.com, grfcpa.com, and nslp.com. Thank you for listening. And until next time on the Exit Readiness Podcast, this is Pat Ennis and Walter Dial signing off.